All right. Give me a minute. Okay. So starting off with this presentation. So, talking about the data analysis and app development project, where I was able to also analyzing data sets with about pollutants level across 12 stations in Beijing, China. So that was the basis of this whole project, or the data set that was worked on. So moving forward, uh, this happened to be a comprehensive presentation on data analysis and app development projects. This will guide you through the journey of applying, processing, and analyzing the data, the processes that were involved, and how I went about developing a user-friendly application to succeed my findings. Okay. So over to the first instance, started off with data acquisition and pre-processing, where I was able to acquire the data set from a website, and also the idea of implementing GitHub into the whole process, where I was able to link my GitHub and be able to clone my GitHub repository to get the data sets which I had already saved in my GitHub repository using certain method which we'll go through. And after that, so the data sets were separated into 12 data sets which represented each station in Beijing, China, and how I went about concatenating these data sets into one for their analysis and preprocessing. So just briefly going into the Python file to have a better view of what transpired. Okay, so let's start from here. So I'll start from tax one, which is data acquisition and importation library. So this is why I started off importing the necessary libraries that will guide me through the whole process. And this is why I had to impute my certain credentials to have access to my repository, since it was a private repository. To gain access into repository, I was able to, this is where I was able to clone my repository to gain access into my files, and also list out the data sets that I earlier talked about that were needed for the analysis. And this is why I went about concatenating, or rather assigning these variables into a variable and concatenating them into having now or a single data sets for the analysis and pre-processing. So over here, um, so that was the first thing that I did as relation to this processes involved here. So data acquisition, data merging, data handling missing values. So if we move over to the next slide, this is one of our screenshot from the collab from the Python file, from the IPMP file, where I was able to try to discover missing values from a different using a visual perspective on it. So this is just screenshots of the process of importation of libraries down to concatenations of the data sets that were obtained from the GitHub repository, and also down to the missing value, which I will further go into the chat to show in a better form. So if we move a little further down, past some fundamental data understanding, you would see over here where I was able to get not just the numbers of missing values in the features and the data sets, but also the percentages as regards to the totality of um, the data sets. And also here, I came into visualization to have a better understanding of in the overall data sets, how the idea of these missing values and how they seem to be in the data sets using a visual aid with the heat map. So all of that coincides with what have stated in this previous slide over here, down to data handling. Um, yes, and these are the overviews, the views. So over to exploratory data analysis, which yes, we did the earlier on, statistical summaries, find the mean, median, standard deviation, variances, and every aspect of that to numerical um, features and the data sets, down to visualization, creation of heat maps and histogram to uncover patterns, missing data, and skewness and distribution, which I will talk about in a minute. And also down to identifying key trends and correlation within the data sets to inform further analysis. So if I move further down into the data sets, you can see where I did involve the use of distribution plots to understand the skewness of the data sets to help me or guide me in the process I'm going to use for imputation, especially using mean or median, with the understanding that median is mostly used to address skewed values, while mean is mostly used to address non-skewed values. So this gave me a better understanding. And if you look further down here, where I did state on my observations. And if you look further down here, we can also see where I implemented this using for skewed values, I made use of median. And when it came to non-skewed values, I made use of mean. All right, so moving over to the data sets. So yeah, this was just a screenshot of what was earlier seen, and this also is a when it comes to the data visualization page. This was just basically parallel coordinates that I used to have a better understanding of how metrological features in the data sets related or how they influence the air quality in these places in Beijing. Okay, so moving over to machine learning models. So this involved the process of through the whole process, trying to understand how um, the features that would probably be the best bets to be predicted as compared to other features. So terming as the dependent variable and others being the independent variables. So here I did some model selection, choosing a model which aligns to the project. Since I was in the line of regression and not classification. So I did work with KNN and regression and assess model performance and accuracy using several model evaluation metrics. Refine improved models based on results. So this refinement comes down to the use of parameter tuning, which um, going back to the code, and if we go over to model building page or chapter, we would see the process of how I was able to delineate the features, which I term my dependent variables and independent variable, down to splitting these features and over to standardization, where I made use of a standard scalar, and over to linear regression, which was my first model that I did use. And if we look over at the model evaluation for linear regression, we can see that our root squared was 0.2, which was almost close to one, but it still needed a little bit of improvement. So here I improvised, or rather I implemented the use of KNN, and it brought it a little bit further from 0.82 to 0.87, which was somewhat of an improvement in that part. And from 0.87, using hyperparameter tuning, using the grid search, it came a little further down up to 0.89. So um it just puts focus on the idea of always looking for the best model to get the best insight, or rather to be able to get the best prediction of the data set. So moving over to the next one, which was application development. Um, so this was where every processes that were done was trying to replicate it on a GUI platform or GUI interface, which Streamlit here was used. So this is the application. This is the rundown of how I went about doing this. So platform creation, developed a user-friendly platform automating specific process. So down from the creation, I integrated the data analysis stage of the process and everything I did in the IPMB file. down to the feature implementation, added visualization pages, predictive modeling, where we have also modeling page and interactive user inputs, and also enabled a tailored output based on user interactions and the way or the data they're trying to get out of it. So moving over to the next page, we can see an overview of the Streamlit application from the data loading, data preprocessing, data visualization, and ultimately the data modeling page. We talks gives a better insights into that. So briefly, we're just gonna go over to that and just have an understanding of how it looks. Right. So I think this was it. That wasn't it. Okay. So yeah. So this is the Streamlit app that was created from the overview earlier saw. So here it talks about page. So this is basically telling you what's the navigation, what exists behind each navigation pages here. Over data loading, we have a brief overview of the data set and what it's talking about and how these page can help out in getting some sort of insights from the data preview and a slider to improve on the amount of data that's been shown to get better insight into the values that exist. Over to descriptive statistics, mean median mode into missing values of the data sets, and over to preprocessing, where in what I did talk about earlier about mean median. So here you can use the distribution plots to have an understanding of skewed and non-skewed variables, to have an understanding of if you are to use the mean or the median. So mode also come into play in categorical features, which also in such situations where those also needs to be fixed. And dropping of columns where you feel like the data is not doesn't contribute in any way to the data to the totality of the data set. And also we have feature engineering. So certain features will develop the season column, the AQI buckets to categorize, and over ultimately to view the processed data. And if we come over to data visualization, we can tick on these to have an understanding of certain key findings. And so we have here to show average pollution levels by stations. And from what we can see here, we having Dongxi and Gusheng having a very high concentration level across CO, which seems to be the dominant of all pollutants. And yeah, moving forward, you can see for show average concentration of each pollutants, show AKI distribution, and prior coordinates plots of weather and AQI. And ultimately, we come down to the data modeling and evaluation page. We talks about choosing of features and how to go about the whole process. So if I choose my independent variable to be 2 PM10, and I choose this to be 2.5. This other things, yeah, this is not going to show till I do some work here. But yes, so from standardization to test string split to model selection to hyperparameter tuning and performing some grid search. So basically, that is how the app works. So back to our slide over here. Critical reflections and improvement. Some of the challenges I would say I faced was as regards to in the imbalanced data sets, facing of missing values, as I earlier stated, with mean median. So this was certain challenges I did face, and the modeling to find the best model to get the best insight, or rather, that works best in predicting my feature. One of the improvements that I would say were made or could be made is in the acquisition of data to bring a very defined and reasonable insights into what the data is talking about, rather than employing certain imputation method, which might not give the a real idea behind the data.